want to cover one of the articles that one of our numbers brought to the attention of the rest of us, and this comes from the wonderful work of Reason.com, which I certainly want to give a shout out to. In addition to The Appeal, another independent publication, I think it's very, very important that you subscribe to these wonderful resources because they really do a lot. Along with the third one, I recommend The Wired to expose what's really going on out there that most people are not getting from CNN and MSNBC and the mainstream media, certainly not Fox. So when you read this, let's see what you would come up with if you were reading this. KTLA 5 out of California had this provocative part of their news report. A week-long human trafficking sting operation nets 547 arrests across California. With Operation Reclaim and Rebuild, over 100 law enforcement agencies set out rescuing victims of sexual slavery and human trafficking, apprehending their captors, and disrupting the demand for vulnerable individuals. So is quoted by Elizabeth Nolan Brown in her Reason.com piece entitled Human Trafficking Sting Yields 547 Arrests, but Only One for Human Trafficking. Well, this is certainly very interesting. So, to the casual observer, Miss Nolan Brown indicates that surely suggests that hundreds of traffickers were arrested during the operation, which took place from January 26th through February 1st, almost a week long. And with a few careful language tricks, police are able to stoke this impression. Language tricks. This is why these press releases often come out of the chief of police's office, and it is done by professional press release writers. There was a time where I worked in a museum in Fargo, North Dakota, and I wrote these types of releases, okay, for that very department. So I know a little bit about how they're crafted, and I know a little bit about wordsmithing and how you can put together a valuable piece that you can use to draw people in as into a museum or draw people in as to a scam. Reading further, this is by the Los Angeles Police Department, the LAPD. Indeed, some 333 of those arrested were exploiters, quote unquote. Well, what does that mean? When you dig a little deeper, Ms. Nolan Brown indicates, it is a mirage, quote, designed to give the impression that police are underlined playing heroes instead of consensual sex cops. So she breaks down the numbers. She says there were full 214 arrests. Of the 333 were for unrelated charges unrelated to sexual exploitation. She says that the LAPD doesn't say for what they were arrested exactly, but that it could mean that women were arrested for prostitution, as is often the case in so-called human trafficking stings. So again, exploitation is a very amorphous term. What does that mean? Such things also are used as a catch-all for petty crime dragnets, picking up people for things like drug possession, she continues, driving on an expired license, owning a gun without a rights permit, or having outstanding warrants. All of these are exploitation. Not exactly the exploitation we would expect, but we have been talking about it on this channel. Members of Cage have been talking about it, and we've been talking about it in various other fora across the United States, that this is what police do. They twist statistics around to make it appear like there is more going on in terms of sex trafficking than what meets the eye. And 332 exploiters would be a lot if the term here actually meant people guilty of his sexual exploitation, Ms. Nolan Brown continues. But the law enforcement now tends to lump prostitution customers along with sex traffickers, counting any attempt to pay a consenting adult for sex as exploitation. Okay? And even though they merely face, quote, she continues, a solicitation charge. So, we have noted with some disgust at how police will include as the children they save The children of men they arrest on sex charges from internet adult sex stings. Understand, they set an adult up on an adult platform where they're indicating an interest in an adult. They spin that around after so many messages and they say, oh, by the way, I'm 15. And even though there's no sex talk, even though there's, if anything, banter of disbelief, which we found in part of our members, they will still turn that around and make that appear to be sexual exploitation. And then they'll come to the home of the person and take away their children and claim they rescued this children. So imagine how disgusting that is. Somebody goes on an adult platform, but the police turn around and say that they're really looking for children. And I've talked about here oftentimes how police will turn it around and make it appear like you're doing something on an adult site looking for children, even though there's no evidence that you're actually doing that. That's what's so extraordinary about this. They never ever explain to the public or anyone else. I've never seen it where a member of the press says, why are you looking for people exploiting children on an adult site? Where is the evidence that they went there looking for children? Where is the evidence of the person saying, hey, where are the children on this adult site? Hey, I'm looking for somebody who's younger than 18. Where is this evidence that they're doing that? Because we don't see it consistently over and over again. We don't see police engaging the public after these members of the public have deliberately, directly, and clearly said, I'm looking for children. They don't even use couched language in the many cases we're talking about. Again, I'm not saying that people don't go and look for children on the deep and dark web, at ball games, private functions, whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that where police are spending much of their energy and where they're getting much of their arrests are not in platforms where people are actually engaging looking for children. That appears very much to be the case, and police have yet to disagree with us using actual facts, actual stats. In fact, this article indicates what we've been saying all along too, where they are ginning up the facts and the stats to make them appear to be one thing when in fact they're something else. ICAC's own stats are extremely difficult to make head or tails out of because they conflate a number of factors, such as what she's talking about in this article. Imagine here, you're driving on an expired license, owning a gun without rights, being rearrested for another actual felony or misdemeanor and counting that as, oh, this sex offender was rearrested. To the public's mind, they were rearrested for a sex offense, when in fact, that's not the reason they were rearrested at all. And they shouldn't have been arrested the first time. Again, highly deceptive tactics, highly deceptive language, and thank God Elizabeth Nolan Brown with Reason.com is onto it. She goes on and she breaks down the stats further. She says only one of 333 were charged with trafficking of a minor for a commercial sex act. So, going back to the top, 547 arrests in California over a 5-day period involving 100 law enforcement officers for sexual slavery and human trafficking. Sexual slavery and human trafficking. Boy, they know how to gin up the right words, right? Sexual slavery sounds really bad. Which part of sexual slavery, I wonder, is driving with an expired license or owning a gun or having outstanding warrants for stupid things? Which part of sexual slavery is that? Well, you go on and you have one human trafficking charge. Now, the DA's office, she points out, something we've seen, the prosecution is in on this too. They quickly come to the rescue and say, well, there's going to be more charges. I mean, these are only the preliminary charges, okay? It's a convenient way to put off people who might question the premises of their sting. Ms. Nolan Brown continues, quote unquote, Sure, sure, she continues. Only one charge now, speaking as a prosecutor, but there could be more coming later. And again later, you'll get no response or promise that the investigation is still ongoing. I followed up on enough of these things, she says, to know the playbook well. And so correct is she. We followed up on them too, and a number of times we found nothing. I'm still waiting for the local police commander to get back to me on those stats. And this is year 4, I think it is, or 5. I lose track. Okay. So it's not even clear that the one human trafficking arrest had anything to do with the massive sting operation. And listen to this, the arrest for that one human trafficking case, the one that involved a trafficking of a minor for a commercial sex act, this was done 3 days before Operation Reclaim and Rebuild supposedly started. So they didn't even arrest that person. Of the 547 that they did 3 days later, the one that actually was sexual exploitation and slavery, that one, no, that was 3 days before. You gotta love this, I'm telling you. The deceptive descriptions, she continues, of those arrests aren't the only language used to obscure what's really happening. Police also trumpet the rescue of 166 adults and 11 minor victims. The adults were offered support, say police, no further details, whatever that means. This is also part of the playbook that we've exploited here, and she's exploiting here when she says, be incredibly vague about what happened. We've exposed it here too. They're not at all clear about their statistics, but boy, when they want to be clear, when they want you to know exactly what happened, boy, they're very, very clear. They know how to do it. They know how to get ahead of the game. They know how to be abundantly clear so that the public really knows. But here we have the vagueness. So we are vague, or we say charges are coming later that are more serious, or we just lie about the charges to begin with. Okay? And here too, she points out something interesting. She says sex workers, prostitutes that are adults are being counted as rescue victims, even if the only rescue involves handcuffing them, questioning them, and giving them the phone number of some local social services group. Now, I have heard back from a woman recently on my channel here on ICAC Unpacked, and she said, well, she said, she took me to task. She said, I was a kid, well, she didn't say kid, young woman who was exploited and forced into sexual slavery. And certainly that happens, and forced into prostitution. But I don't know to what extent that is the norm. I mean, we have a lot of people who are prostitutes for money, and some even make a living doing that. And some are call girls, so they're high class prostitutes. And again, I'm not making any distinction necessarily. I'm not calling it into doubt, but it is certainly the case that you have people who make a living doing this, and they are their own marketers, if you will. Okay, but they're counted as victims here. And we can certainly discuss how they might be victims, but let's not talk about them as sexual slavery. Next, let's not pretend like a bunch of people were deliberately exploited by people who have been caught in these things, because that's a little bit overblown. We have a separate category for that. It's not the same as sex stings of minors, which is how they like to make it sound like. Okay? So we have a very interesting article here that certainly goes into some very interesting details here. And what we find is that these end up being witch hunts that don't exactly expose the truth of what happens. So this is the salon, excuse me, um, this is the reason.com, excuse me, and as part of that network, you have, I would say, The Appeal, and you would have Wired Magazine also in there, where they're doing some excellent work exposing this sort of thing. You know, this is a network of deliberate deceit that usually hits the beat reporter who goes to this site, and this is what trolls don't understand, and gets this information from the cop or from the public information officer, who gets it from the cop, gets it from the detective. It's approved by the chief before it goes out. as is the case here locally. And what you find out is it's not entirely true. You know, you have pictures of police officers standing around there and they're very serious. But if they were catching these rampant, remember, there are rampant cases of sexual exploitation of children everywhere. So why aren't they focused on that? Why is it like they are out west in the net nannies where they were deliberately not focusing on these actual cases of reactive stings? It wasn't even as good as this. Okay. And they were lying about actual children who were being trafficked in favor of going after fake statistics so that they could get public approbation and look good. I mean, a lot of careers were made on this, but a lot of children were not saved. It sort of reminds me of the Uvalde scandal where the shooter killed a lot of people in a school and they had up to what, 800 officers on standby? Many of them in the school waiting to move and they never moved. You know, this idea that somehow police are always doing the right thing at every moment. Look, police are like everybody else. I've made this comment. They're neither bad nor worse. They're just another form of life. Okay? And they have agendas too. So those of you out there are thinking, no, police never have agendas. They're never doing anything wrong. You should always believe your cop. Well, I used to believe that. A lot of us used to believe that. We grew up thinking that this is what we were told when we were in school. Always trust the cop. But I would never tell my children today to always trust the cop. Why? Listen to, I would teach them critical thinking skills today. Understand how police actually work. That's what I would teach them. Because in critical thinking skills, you can read articles like this and understand where it's handed to you. Or you can read articles, as I put on here several times, where I break it down and help you understand exactly how they exploit the written word to get you focused in a different direction and not on what's really going on. I encourage you to read very carefully because you and the public are being deceived, and it's not by people like me. This is ICAC Unpacked. Have a good day.